As I begin, I would like to first of all affirm that I reject both the doctrine of eternal conscious punishment and the doctrine of annihilationism. I would further like to state that I unequivocally do not believe that the term hell has any place in our Bible, either in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. Why? As we shall see, the etymology of this word shows why it doesn't belong in the Scriptures. When we look this up, notice what we find. The English word may be in part from Old Norse mythology. Hel in Norse mythology was the name of Loki's daughter, who rules over the evil dead in Niflheim, which they consider to be the lowest of all worlds. Yes, this is the origin. I cannot imagine why the translators would use such a name for the Greek name Gehenna. It's a totally pagan name which has been adopted into our Bibles. So I must ask the question, why should any pagan concept such as this be dignified by giving it a place in Scriptures? This pagan name from Old Norse mythology was conceived no earlier than 600 to 700 years after Christ. For the translators to add this to our Bibles in place of the term Gehenna is actually shameful and plainly a mistranslation, not representative of the early languages of the Bible. Annihilationists are correct that the Old Testament Valley of Hinnom, which became Gehenna in the New Testament, was indeed nothing but a garbage dump just outside of Jerusalem, and this garbage dump was burning all the time. It was named as such because of the heritage of the location. It was the same place in the Old Testament where the Israelite worshippers of Baals and the false god Molech sacrificed their children, a horrible thing. This was utterly detestable to Yahweh. It is described in the book of 2 Chronicles when speaking of the disobedient king Ahaz. Let's look at this passage. It says, Ahab was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. But he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He even made metal images for the Baals. And he made offerings in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burned his sons as an offering, according to the abominations of the nations, whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. Do you realize that this was one of the major factors in the decision by God to destroy Jerusalem the first time? As always, God gave the prophecy through his servants, and then he kept that promise. Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians somewhere around 586 BC, and the infamous Valley of Hinnom, wherein these children were burned, became a garbage dump just outside the city after it was rebuilt. Yes, it was because this place was so detestable to God that it became such. As the prophet Jeremiah stated, it would never come into his mind to do such a heinous act as burning children in a fire. Notice what the prophet wrote. He said, And they have built high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind. Now this is God speaking here. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, for they will bury in Topheth, because there is no room elsewhere. And the dead bodies of this people will be food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and none will frighten them away. And I will silence in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voices of gladness, and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. Yes, God kept his promise. He destroyed this place and made it a wasteland, which later became known as Gehenna. In fact, this was the last straw for God. I must reiterate that this verse that we just read above said that the burning of children was so detestable to God that he would never even think of doing such a thing. So now how can we today argue that God will burn most of his disobedient children forever in a place called hell? Think about that. We're created in God's image. Is that something that you would do for any reason to anyone? It's actually unthinkable. But despite these facts, most of our modern translations have translated the name Gehenna as hell. However, we can find out what Jesus called it by looking at one of the Bible translations that have transliterated this word into English. Two well-respected Bible translations that are in excess of 100 years old have rendered that term properly. I'm speaking of Young's literal translation and the Rotherham Emphasized Bible. They never use the term hell. But in searching, we find that there are many modern translations which do not use this term. Here are the ways in which Gehenna is used in the New Testament. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. Jesus gave 4 examples of how it might be, but we're going to read 2 of them. In Matthew the 5th chapter, he says, "But I tell you that everyone who is angry with his brother without cause will be in danger of the judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Raka, will be in danger of the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of Gehenna." Now let me ask you a question. Do you really think that Jesus literally thought that this was going to be the grounds for eternal torment? If this is true, then we're all going to go there. What about these other verses? Let's look at Matthew 5:29. "If your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members should perish than that your whole body should be cast into Gehenna." Do you think that Jesus really meant that those who have become angry and those who have been stumbled are going to burn forever in a fiery place called hell? You and I both know that that is a preposterous assumption. To consider Gehenna as a place of eternal torment is a complete misrepresentation of the love of God. I'll have more on this later. Now, I know that most of our modern translations have succumbed to the pressure and have mistranslated Gehenna as hell. So it looks like, unfortunately, that we are stuck with this name. So now going forward, I will quote some of these popular translations. But keep in mind that when we see this term hell, its form in the original language of the Bible is Gehenna. So with this in mind, when we come back in our next session, we will look at this passage from the New King James Version. It says, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell." This sounds pretty terrible, doesn't it? Won't you join us in our next session as we examine this passage in detail? All of this and much more I have outlined in my book, God's Purpose for Hell, a compelling probe of God's love for the lost, which is now available at Amazon.com and in the Kindle edition. Until next time, may you have a great day and may God bless you greatly. Thank you.